Hey, Miss Raymond here today to talk to you about probability. All right, and we are only going to do one part of probability today, and in future lessons we will do some other lessons about probability related to probability. So today we're going to talk about describing the likelihood of an event. All right. So as you can see in the diagram here, this is from bigideasmath.com. This is showing us a diagram about probability. And we are going to look at that in more detail later and watch a few video clips and some tutorials. So hopefully you'll learn about how to describe the likelihood of an event. All right. All right. All right, we're going to watch a short video clip from Math Antics about basic probability.
Hi, I'm Rob. Welcome to Math Antics. In this video, we're going to learn about how to do math with things that only sometimes happen. They might be likely or unlikely. We're going to learn about probability. Usually in math, we deal with things that always happen the same way. They're completely certain. Like if you add 1 and 1, you're always going to get 2. If you multiply 2 and 3, you're always going to get 6. There's no uncertainty at all. But in the real world, things aren't always so predictable. Take a coin toss, for example. We can't predict whether it'll be heads or tails. It's unpredictable or random. And that's why some people will flip a coin to help decide which of two things to do. That's how I make every decision in life. Why am I not surprised? Oh no. Good luck. But even though we don't know what each coin flip is going to be, we do know a few things about it. We know that with a fair coin toss, that heads is just as likely to show up as tails. The probability of an event, like getting heads or getting tails, is a value that tells us how likely that event is to happen. With our coin toss, since each side is just as likely, and there's only 2 sides to a coin, if we flipped a coin a lot of times, we should expect that about half the flips will be heads and about half the flips will be tails. That means that the probability of flipping heads is the fraction 1/2, and the probability of flipping tails is also 1/2. Let's look at this in a little more detail on something called a probability line. It's a number line that goes from 0 to 1. A probability of 0 means that an event cannot happen. It's impossible. And a probability of 1 means that an event is definitely going to happen. It's certain. That's why the probability line only goes from 0 to 1. An event can't be less likely than impossible, and it can't be more likely than certain. A probability of 1/2, like with our coin toss, means that an event is just as likely to happen as it is to not happen. A probability less than 1/2 means that an event is unlikely, and a probability greater than 1/2 means that an event is likely. Oh, and in addition to fractions, it's also common to write probabilities as decimals or percentages, since you can easily convert between those three. A probability of 0 is the same as a 0% chance of something happening. A probability of 1/2 is the same as a 50% chance of something happening. And a probability of 1 is the same as a 100% chance of something happening. Now that you know how a coin toss works, let's see an example of an event that is unlikely, using something a little more complicated than a coin. Let's take a look at dice. A standard die has 6 sides numbered 1 through 6. When you roll it, any of those sides is just as likely to come up as the others. That sounds a lot like flipping a coin, doesn't it? Each side of a die is just as likely to come up as the others, and each side of a coin was just as likely to come up as the other. So you might expect that the probability of rolling a 3 is 50%. But remember, with a coin toss, there are only 2 possibilities, heads or tails. With dice, there are 6 possibilities, and that's going to make a difference in its probability. One way to think about it is that it's certain that one of those 6 sides will land facing upwards, which is a probability of 1 or 100%. But since only one side can face upwards for a given roll, we have to divide up that value among all the possibilities. In the case of a coin toss, since there were only 2 possibilities, we had to divide the probability by 2. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2, which is the decimal 0.5 or 50%. But with the die, we need to divide the probability up evenly between 6 possibilities. 1 divided by 6 is 1/6, which is equivalent to 0.167, or 16.7%. So that would be right here on our probability line. That means it isn't likely that I would roll a 3, for instance, but it's just as likely as rolling any other number. And since all 6 numbers have the same probability, each number should come up about as often as the others. To see if they do, I'm going to conduct some trials. That's an excellent argument. Allow me to deliberate. Guilty. Actually, when dealing with probability, a trial, which can also be called an experiment, is a process that has a random outcome, like tossing a coin, or rolling dice, or spinning a spinner. And the outcome of a trial is what happens in that particular trial, like flipping heads, or rolling a 3. So I'm going to conduct several trials by rolling a die multiple times and keeping track of how many times I roll each number. Aha! You said that each number was going to come up just as often as the other numbers. But look, there's more 2s than there are 5s. How do you explain that? Well, remember, we're dealing with things that are random. They're unpredictable. We can't know exactly what will happen, just what will happen on average. So now I have to calculate the average? Well, when we say on average, we mean that the more trials you do, the closer you get to the expected probabilities. Keep watching. There. Now that we've done a lot of trials, you can see that our totals are much closer to what you'd expect them to be. I guess you're probably right. That's one of the really important things to keep in mind about probability. If you do just a few trials, the results might not end up very close to what you'd expect. In fact, they could be way off. But if you do more trials, you increase your chances of reaching the expected probabilities. There's another thing I should point out. Remember, the probability of flipping heads is 1/2, and the probability of flipping tails is 1/2. The probability of rolling a 1 is 1/6, and the probability of rolling any other number on the die is 1/6. If you add up the probabilities for the coin flip, you get 2/2, or 1. And if you add up the probabilities for rolling a die, you get 6/6, which is also 1. And that's not just a coincidence. If you add up the probabilities of all possible outcomes of a trial, the total is going to be 1, or 100%. Because it is certain that at least one of those possibilities will happen.
All right, now we're gonna look at lesson 9.1 in Big Ideas Math, and we're gonna look at the key idea about probability. All right, so the probability of an event is a number that measures the likelihood that the event will occur. Probabilities are between 0 and 1, just like we saw in the video clip, including 0 and 1. The diagram relates likelihoods, which are listed above the diagram, right? Impossible, unlikely, equally likely to happen or not happen, likely, and certain. And then below the diagram, we have your probability. So 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. Which is also like what we saw in the video. So one thing to remember is that probabilities can be written as fractions, right? So we have 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, or as decimals. So we got 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, or percents, right? 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. All right. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and look at an example. All right, so we're going to look at, we're back at Big Ideas Math, and this is from Chapter 9, Section 1, Example 1. So there's an 80% chance of thunderstorms tomorrow. Describe the likelihood of the event. All right. The probability of thunderstorms tomorrow is 80%. Remember, we said probability could be expressed as percent. So the probability is 80%. And because 80% is close to 75%, it is likely that there will be thunderstorms tomorrow. All right, and we can go back and look at our chart. So let me get us back there real quick. All right, so if we go back up here, so if we look at our chart here, we can see, so our 80% chance with our thunderstorm, right, as you can see, is going to fall a little past the 75%, but we're not quite to 100%. So if you were somewhere around in here, so that meant that the likelihood of that event happening, right, it's likely. It makes it likely. All right, now we're going to look at extra example 1 tutorial. All right.
There is a 20% chance of snow flurries tomorrow. Describe the likelihood of the event. The sentence, "There is a 20% chance of snow flurries tomorrow," means that the probability of snow flurries tomorrow is 20%. Remember, probability of an event is a number that measures the likelihood that the event will occur. We can use a diagram to help us describe the likelihood. The probabilities are given below, and the likelihoods are above. Our event says that the probability is 20%, which is located about here. 20% is close to 25%. Because 20% is close to 25%, this corresponds with the likelihood of 25%, which is unlikely. So, it is unlikely that there will be snow flurries tomorrow.
All right, so we are going to look at the likelihood of an event occurring. So this is a video clip that's going to kind of go through and express the likelihood of an event occurring.
In this video tutorial, we're going to be discussing about the likelihood of an event occurring. The probability of an event is a number between 0 and 1, and that is a decimal that you would convert into a percentage by multiplying by 100. So once you get a probability of, let's say, 0%, it's associated with the likelihood of that specific event occurring as impossible. If the probability is 25%, then the likelihood of that event occurring would be what we call unlikely. The probability of 50%, the likelihood of that event occurring would be called equally likely. If a probability is 75%, then the likelihood of that event occurring is what we call likely. And last but not least, if an event has a 100% probability of occurring, then we call that certain.
All right, so we're back to Big Ideas Math, and we're going to look at 2 on your own problems. So if you don't have any paper or pencil, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and grab that so we can do a little bit of practice, okay? All right, so problem 1 says, describe the likelihood of the event given its probability. The probability that you land a jump on a snowboard is 1/2. Okay, so what would be the likelihood of that event occurring? So remember, 1/2, right, is the same thing as saying 50%, right? If you were expressing it as a percent, that would be 50%. And as a decimal, it would be 0.5, right? So what is the likelihood of that event given its probability of 1/2? So let's look back at our diagram here. So remember, here we have impossible at 0% or 0, unlikely at 1/4 or 0.25 or 25%. Equally likely to happen or not happen at 1/2 or 0.5 or 50%, right? Likely at 3/4, 0.75, 75%, and certain at 1 or 100%. All right, so All right, so looking at our problem now that we've looked at that, so 50%, what is the likelihood of that event occurring? So you to jot down what you think it is, and then we will look and see what the answer is, okay? Oops. And we'll look at that in just a minute here. All right. We'll go ahead and look. Let me clear this out. And look at number 2. Oops, sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. All right. Let me go back. All right. All right, let's go ahead and look at problem 2, and then we'll check our answers, okay? All right, problem 2. There is a 100% chance that the temperature will be less than 120 degrees Fahrenheit tomorrow. So again, you're describing the likelihood of the event given its probability. So this time we have a probability of 100%, right? Which we know is the same thing as 1 whole, right? All right, so write down what you think the probability of that would be, and then we're going to go over it. All right, so for number 1, probability that you land a jump on a snowboard is 1/2 or 50%. So that is equally likely to happen or not happen. And then for number 2, 100% chance would mean that it is certain. The probability of that event happening would be certain. All right, so that's all I have for now. So tomorrow you should, hopefully you have in your packet that was mailed home, there should be a worksheet about finding the likelihood of an event occurring. So tomorrow you'll be working on that. All right. If you have any questions, you can always email me, michelle.raymond@citrahealth.com. All right. Stay safe and healthy.